Well, here we are, Chris and Ron, ready, ready to talk about last week, 7, next week, 8, and whatever else comes to mind, like referees and backup quarterbacks and stuff like that.
Good morning.
Good morning.
At least if you're in Hawaii, it's a good morning.
So, thoughts on week 7?
I kind of got the feeling coming in that it was going to be an underdog week. And it was really weird for me because I realized I made 3 plays very early last week, and I made 3 plays on Sunday morning, just when lines went to 3. And they hit numbers that I wanted. Giants going to 3 at home against Washington. Washington shouldn't be a 3-point favorite against anybody. Got Denver in the morning, and I got when Atlanta went to 3. Even though Atlanta gave up, what did Atlanta do? Fumble at the 11, and fumble into the end zone. Atlanta tried desperately to give that game away, but Tampa said, no, we're going to let you win anyway. So it's kind of a weird week. I really thought it was going to be a good underdog week. So I'm very pleased with how it. When underdogs win and when the public loses, if I don't win, then I need to be put off to another planet.
Okay. I didn't win, so put me out to pasture. I've never in my life had so many 7.5 point plus teams that I'm supposed to bet on the point spread. They can't even win the games. I mean, it's every week.
Yeah.
It just seems very odd, and nothing. I'm having a tougher time with metrics. They really contradict logic oftentimes, so that's unpleasant. So I'm looking for a flip around there.
I have 2 thoughts to that. Number one, it's just a mixture of handicapping styles in terms of using power ratings, using matchup analysis, and using situations. And it's tough when there's no contradiction. And when there's a contradiction, it makes it a little tougher. But if you have a couple of those things in alignment, it makes it easier. And I have a feeling you're feeling a little bit like I felt at the beginning of the year when it's like a batter not seeing the ball from a pitcher that good. It really took once week 5 kicked in, and every year is different. Week 1 was very clear for me last year, but weeks 1, 2, and 3 were not clear at all. I was fumbling around, and it really took till week 4 and 5 to really see what was going on. And I just think you'll know when it becomes clear. You'll just know.
Yeah, I agree with that. You get to know when what you're doing is making sense, and when you look at it, and it's just like, well, that's odd. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I'm concerned with is the variance on some numbers versus what the reality is on the team.
Yeah, we could talk, for example, Washington of last week. I mean, Washington and the New York Giants, I think I tweeted beforehand, I wouldn't have been surprised if the game went to overtime because the 2 teams, to me, were just as bad as one another. Sam Howell has high variance as a quarterback. Tyrod Taylor has lower variance than Daniel Jones, but the Giants are an incomplete team as well. It's really one of those where you have a bad team playing another bad team.
Yeah, well, you kind of expect those teams to be not dependable. It's some of these better teams they're just off and on, and it's tough. I mean, some of the things that were done in each of these games they're unpredictable. So it's
yeah. I'm seeing more coaching mistakes than analytics was supposed to make it easier. I think it's making it tougher for a lot of these coaches. They don't realize sometimes what kind of team they have, and not all circumstances say go for it on 4th and 3. And some of these coaches are making, in my opinion, head scratching decisions. And maybe that's good for us, because if you have those kinds of coaches, try to keep them in the league. I'm starting a Save Dennis Allen campaign in New Orleans because I want guys like that in the league.
Well, yeah, that's one way to look at it. Just frustrating. What did go wrong with New Orleans, by the way?
I mean, New Orleans didn't pass the ball downfield until they had to. Before when the score was 24-9, they said, we've got a sense of urgency. We've got to throw the ball downfield. We've got to do these things. But did you see in the first quarter, New Orleans, when the score was close, how many times did Derek Carr throw in front of the chains on third down? It was a joke. It was easy to defend. It was predictable. This is New Orleans until they had to get it going. Then they got it going. They got back into the game, and then they gave it up at the end. But their play calling when the game was on the line in the first half was very predictable in my eyes, and very on point with what New Orleans has been doing under Dennis Allen.
Well, they've got an interesting matchup this week, that's for sure. The Cleveland-Indianapolis game, just another example of the refereeing, one of many games. I had Pittsburgh on Saturday. I think everybody knows.
That was bad.
Untouched, just can go down wherever he wants. And they actually say, and he was over the first down marker, and they said he wasn't. So instead of the game over, they have to give the ball up. And it just you had the Browns. What was the other game? I'm having a brain fart on this one.
Well, I can tell you in college, I don't like to harp on referees, but 5 games that I can name, referees decided who won in college last week. I couldn't believe from one game to another how the referees were deciding games. It happened in the Iowa game. It happened in the Pittsburgh game. That Pittsburgh game that wasn't a bad spot. That was a blind. Do you have to pass an eye test to be a referee in some of these conferences? It was crazy. So whatever the NFL put together wasn't as bad as college on Saturday.
Well, one of the things I've concluded is I think it's mentally so much better for me to have not seen some of the nonsense that's gone on. So after looking at that Pittsburgh and seeing how blatant and obvious it is, and nothing happens, that's far more frustrating than just getting the result. Oh, they lost. Oh, there's a bad call. When you don't see it, it doesn't amplify it as much. So, every one of these games has, bad spots, bad refereeing, just everything, and it just it seems like there's just so much more toss-up luck this year.
Yeah, and that's why. That may get back to my point of trying to have more than one thing in alignment to make a play. Maybe that's why, in retrospect, I had one play in week 4 and one play in week 6, because I just didn't see clear pictures as to what was going on. Week 5 is different because it's the start of the quartile. We went over that many times. And last week, it just was a good feeling with the underdogs. But it's tough. Again, it just depends on, these things kind of even out over the year. So you just have to stick with your metrics. You stick with what you're doing. Any one week is a small sample size. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I was doing just a little revisit to previous years, because first of all, I wanted to find out, because I do all this layering into different forms of betting to basically get better numbers or better value some way, somehow. And by doing that, I actually saved money, but I was doomed anyway this week. So it didn't matter what I did, but at least I saved more losses. But I was looking back, and the odd thing about it is you would think that if you have a reasonably poor week, that your model's off and that it's going to stick with you. But looking back on it, I can go from a great week or from a bad week to a great week, and vice versa. It's just really odd about that. What about you? Do you get concerned that if you get an off week, that's going to stick with you, or can you process it more like a blip?
The first thing I'll do, which is probably what you do too, is look at why I made those plays and say, no, I would make that again. That was a reach. That was a stretch. I will handicap my handicapping first and see where I might have missed the boat. Did I push something or something? Then I look back at the power ratings and say, if it was a power rating play, why did it work, or why did it fail? In the case of your question, why did something not happen? And I'll look back at my power ratings and see if I probably didn't make a mistake, but I could see where a revision might have been coming. Other than that, I'm not going to change too much. I'm going to make sure that I combine all my methods of handicapping. I'm just going to look. The one thing I would do if I had a bad week is I take a step back. I instead of doing what I do on Sunday, I postpone it to Monday. Instead of doing what I do on Monday, I postpone it to Tuesday. I just take one extra day to reset. I think that's human nature, and I think you don't want to rush in and compound the problem. You want to self-analyze first and then move forward.
I remember being struck by how many complete opposite expectations occurred that were absolutely, unpredictable, just out of the blue. I mean, Mac Jones, what they did, a Lions no show or a Baltimore super show, take your pick. But a lot of these games just had, just such extreme atypical results. It's like, this is ridiculous. So that's just the way it is. And we've got to look forward. What are you looking forward to this coming week?
Well, unlike last week when I had 3 very early plays, I only made 1 early play, and I made it before Sunday, actually. Did I make it before? No, I made it on Sunday because it involved the Monday game. When I was adjusting my power ratings on Sunday, based on the Sunday morning results, I realized that the Minnesota Green Bay game of this week was offline compared to my power ratings. So I said, there's just no way that Green Bay should be favored in this particular game, I think it was, or I think that's what it is. Yeah, there's no way that I had the line where I thought it was going to be in that game. So I took Green Bay plus 2.5, I believe, at the time. And I'm not sure it was the right move. It was the right move if Minnesota would have lost, I guess. But it still came down. It did come down because Minnesota won the game. So I'm not sure it was a great move, but I just thought my initial reaction was Green Bay shouldn't have been an underdog at home. Now, my power ratings, now that I have them, says that Green Bay should be an underdog at home. But that's the play I made beforehand, and I have to live with it.
I see that type of stuff is backfiring on me more than it helps. So I kind of stopped with the look ahead lines. But I would have, I thought the same thing about that initially. But Green Bay's got some serious problems. They've got all kinds of headaches. So they've got the injury bug a little bit back, and I don't know what it was, and I know you're not supposed to look at the last game, but the Minnesota has nothing to lose in a very weak schedule ahead. They're not completely out of the playoffs or any sort of the picture. So
no, not in the NFC.
Yeah,
they're certainly in the NFC, that's for sure. Yeah, my conclusion, not based on last week, but now that we have a full body of work, is that Jordan Love of Green Bay didn't learn enough in his 3 years as an understudy to Aaron Rodgers. He's still making throws that aren't there. He still has that live arm. So he's going to be one of those quarterbacks that's going to hit about 57% instead of the requisite 60%. And he's going to throw 17 completions for 220 yards. He can throw the ball downfield, but it's so erratic that he could be throwing into triple coverage 1 minute and then hitting a guy in stride the next minute.
One of the other things I wanted to comment on, I can't find my weekly difference for last week. Hold on a second. It was unbelievable how many teams that were upwardly mobile and doing very well in recent weeks just folded. Let me see.
Yeah, I have a theory on that. And we talked about this briefly from time to time, throw out the week 1 results. And maybe this year, throw out the weeks 1 and 2 results, because none of these guys are up to par. And so if you go back on your last 5 weeks data, you don't have enough data yet, because you'd have to use weeks 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 as I think your last 5 weeks scenario that you've been using over the years is going to kick into play by week 10, and you're going to be more comfortable with it. And I'm going to be more comfortable asking you about it because it's going to be more meaningful. If that makes sense, I don't know how meaningful it is in week 6, 7, maybe even 8.
Well, we'll have to see. It just more teams than not at the top just laid the worst games out there, and just very surprising. And it's a good thing that you don't overvalue it. Mm-hmm. That's what I remember thinking.
All the teams at the top, like you mentioned, seem to be coming back to the pack. No super team, but a hell of a lot of injuries this year. If every team was completely healthy, in my book, San Francisco would be the number 1 team power rated. If they had a healthy Trent Williams at left tackle, if they had a healthy Christian McCaffrey, if they had a healthy Deebo Samuel who didn't even play. I mean, these guys are difference makers, and you got 1 out of 3 of them playing. Fred Warner was banged up in that game. Drew Greenlaw, he was on the ground twice in that game. He didn't play in the previous game. So you're talking about guys that were clearly less than 100%, and Minnesota took advantage of it.
Yeah, it seems like a likely springboard for him, quite frankly. I mean, I hate to have that recency reaction, but it just seems that way.
But that's why we shouldn't overreact to San Francisco losing. We should put some weight into Minnesota winning, but we shouldn't put a lot of weight into San Francisco losing. That's my perspective. At full strength, I'm going to make sure that I properly value this team. San Francisco is that good a team. At less than full strength, everybody in the NFL is vulnerable this year. There's no question about it.
Well, we're seeing that with Buffalo, obviously.
If you look at their metrics ever since Tre'Davious White went out of that lineup, 70% completions allowed. Buffalo doesn't do that. Over 5 yards per carry allowed on the ground. Milano, the linebacker who makes every tackle year in and year out, he's going to be missing for another 2 months. This is not the same Buffalo team that people are used to.
No, they're dropping rapidly and coming back to normal. This is the first time in a long time that it hasn't showed any value on Buffalo this week. So they've corrected, in my model, significantly, because they had been pretty darn strong plays or recommended strong plays. So I'm happy to see them in line.
My power ratings slightly favor Buffalo in this game. Not that I'm a fan, as you know, of laying all those points, and I don't have an interest in the game. I don't like taking favorites that play weak defense, and Buffalo plays weak defense. If Baker Mayfield manages this game, despite my slight lean power rating for Buffalo, if Baker Mayfield manages this game, there's no reason why they can't at least get field goals and get some points against Buffalo's defense.
I think it's very clear they're going to be giving up a lot of points. It doesn't matter who they play. Somehow the defense is going to be able to move the ball, and that playing accordingly. You can't trust him at this point, really.
If Tampa's willing to open up the offense, that could be a higher scoring game than usual, but Thursday games can be weird. And I'm not really interested in that particular over-under.
Are they going to be able to fix these problems in New Orleans?
The team is basically healthy. You got your best player, Lattimore, playing healthy. You got Kamara back, and he's got his legs under him. Derek Carr is healthy. Not all quarterbacks in the NFL are healthy. You got Michael Thomas actually playing ball 7 weeks in a row. That's a miracle. They do not have the injury concerns that other teams have. Can they get it together? I think it's a coaching problem. I've been saying it for years.
They said that Kamara's he was himself in camp, and then after the suspension, he's just been off a step. But has he rebounded at all?
Well, the problem was even last year, playing under the spectrum of perhaps being suspended and then not suspended last year. I don't think he came into game shape last year. And his yards per reception, which is important for me if I'm evaluating a running back, was not good last year. And then, as you pointed out, and others have pointed out, remember his first game back, he caught 11 passes for 33 yards. That means every time you threw a ball to Alvin Kamara, the defense started clapping and applauding because they had nothing that they needed to do. If you're going to have that kind of offense when you throw behind the chains like New Orleans does, you're hurting your own team. So this isn't a personnel problem. It's a coaching problem.
Yeah, it's just remarkable how we always see the same things where they just dump off and futile type plays, and then receivers running routes at 9-yard marks instead of 10-yard marks. These are all just coaching things. You've got to have these people knowing it inside and out. So
you and I, we look at our metrics, and I circle all the key metrics in a matchup. It may be that team A versus team B, I'm circling different things than when team A places team C. So in the Indianapolis-New Orleans game, I have matchup metrics that favor New Orleans in this game. Specifically, New Orleans plays very strong against a Minshew type attack where they're dinking and dunking and throwing those passes or whatever. New Orleans is not going to allow Minshew to throw for a lot of yards in this particular game. And secondarily, I think that the other thing I would worry about would be on the New Orleans side is that if Carr wants to throw deeper, he may get sacked a little bit based on my sack metrics. But overall, I see this as a 50-50 game that New Orleans having slightly better personnel.
Yeah, that's pretty much the way I see it. How angry are the Colts going to be after the way they had that game stolen?
That was. I mean, phantom pass interferences are one thing, but they forgot about the rule of what's the rule? What's the word I'm thinking of? When the pass is 20 yards away from the receiver.
Oh, yeah. Uncatchable or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the ball there was one throw that you needed 5 people standing on top of each other to even get to, and it was just not a pass that was catchable. So the flag should have been waved at that particular point. Let's see. Birdie's question is that Carr is the issue. He is not the guy for that roster. I kind of disagree with that. I think Carr is being inhibited by the offensive scheme. But, offensively, the Saints haven't done much. They actually didn't do much in Drew Brees' last year with Sean Payton in some respects. So it's been a 3 or 4 year problem. Uncatchable ball. Thanks, Hector. That's the wording.
It just seems odd that the Jags could command being 3-point favorites in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, let's see. My power numbers on that game
are
shorter than that. My power numbers are 1.5 Jacksonville. it's a tough game because normally Jacksonville's a pretty good dog in this spot with this matchup, but they're not a dog in this game. It kind of takes away my edge. I have a feeling I'm going to have very few plays this week. You know, where did I go from 1 to 9 to 1 to 7? I might be back to 1 or 2.
I can't blame you. It's a rough slate.
Yeah.
And, same thing with Houston. It's kind of strange to see them a full field goal favorite.
Yeah, I think I had a question in this chat. Maybe I had a direct email, actually, from Twitter. Said 2 weeks ago, do you think Houston will be favored against Carolina? And I said, absolutely. And so, yeah, I set this game at 3. I think the break helps both teams. We talk about new coaches needing early buys. Both coaches have buys. So I think I actually think you're going to see a good game with Houston, Carolina, because they can make corrections. So which coach is going to make the most corrections? The absolute rookie head coach or Frank Reich, who we're all kind of disappointed in, but he has 20 years of experience.
Well, I think Houston was basically on a roll going into that bye. I'm not sure they wanted that bye. And then
right.
On the other end, obviously Carolina was disheveled, and now you have the new play caller. They get to retool. We don't know what to really expect with a couple of weeks to prepare. So I think there's a lot of ifs in this game.
Yeah, boy, this is one of those close your eyes, and if you trust what you see, I probably would take Carolina +3, but I'm going to let it percolate all week. And if I miss the 3, I'm going to say, oh, well, who cares?
Yeah.
I mean, I want to be realistic about this. I'm not forcing anything.
So the Rams defense is finally falling apart.
Yeah, that was an interesting game. I just couldn't bet Pittsburgh because the Rams had shown me some stuff all week, all year. And then we find out that they don't have any running backs. The new no-name defense couldn't do everything. Their sacks are down even with a healthy Aaron Donald. The fact that Pittsburgh got their wide receiver back. So now we're back to square one. If Dallas, what's the Rams record? 3-4? It's below 50%. And if they lose to Dallas, which they're expected to do, they're right back in the mix of, hey, we may not make the playoffs again, which is what some of us thought at the beginning of the year. But I had to come off that a little bit because they were playing so well.
The trade deadline is the trade deadline the 30th?
I believe it is the 31st, which is Halloween. The trade deadline happens while we tape next week.
Okay.
And Tennessee has got to jump on the trade deadline. Scott says he likes the Titans this week, pretty much season on the line. The problem with the Titans is they're sellers right now. And there is I think I wrote about this on the Wager Talk article that came out today. There is going to be a tremendous drop-off if Ryan Tannehill, who's on the last legs of his career, is out, and you have to put in either Malik Willis or the other guy, Will Levis, the rookie. You're looking at scores. If you think Tennessee games were low scoring before, they're going to be even lower scoring without Tannehill in the lineup.
Well, if you were betting against Tennessee, which quarterback would you want to see lined up?
Wow, I would take either of them. But Willis has more escapability. So if Atlanta's not playing assignment sound defense, and sorry, Birdie, Atlanta does not always play assignment sound defense. I could see Willis will run for 75 yards against Atlanta. The problem is he may only pass for 75 yards against Atlanta. Will Levis would definitely not be ready. He hasn't suited up. He hasn't been active on game day. This would be the first time I think he would be active. He took 46 sacks his last season at Kentucky, which was an ascending program, and he was expected to contend for the Heisman. He was expected to be a top 10 pick. That didn't materialize. It's Atlanta, so it's not the greatest pass rush team in the history of the NFL, but I wouldn't touch Tennessee without Tannehill in the lineup.
No, I'd rather see Willis just because you don't know what's going to go on with Levis. But I don't think that there's any difference between them rating wise. So somebody we've never seen play before has the same value as Willis.
Yeah, how do you like that? I would say that if you want a prop, I would take Willis over rushing yards.
Okay. Oh, the Pats never do what we want them to do.
Yeah, they were supposed to be the play, and after my rant on Friday, there was no way I was going to pivot and say, yeah, I would just leave that game alone. But New England stopped turning the ball over and actually scored before the fourth quarter of the game. It's amazing what happens when that occurs.
Was that was that them being good, or is that Buffalo playing horrible?
I think they had a good game plan against Buffalo, recognizing Buffalo's defensive flaws due to injury. That gave Mac Jones confidence. There's nothing like a confidence builder when you take an early lead on a team, and that really helped settle the team down. And defensively, the game plan all along when you play against Buffalo is to make Josh Allen overextend what he can do. Make him try to do more than what he should be doing. And that's what happens. Josh Allen gets greedy and then he commits turnovers.
So the Patriots are pretty banged up, though, and they're not going to be able to they're going to have a problem containing Miami, don't you think?
Yeah, the speed is going to show up in this game, and Miami's going to absolutely have a field day on that side. New England's game plan has to be Miami's got a pretty average defense. They don't have all their bodies healthy right now. New England, Dennis Allen, maybe even New England's goal is 35 minutes time of possession. That's what I would shoot for. You do everything to move the chains. Because a guy like Tua, like the Kenny Stablers, like the Tom Brady's, like whoever you want, when you get Tua in rhythm, you can't stop that kind of quarterback. The way to keep Tua off rhythm is to keep him on the sidelines.
No, that makes sense. Is it going to be a hot, sweaty day to bother the New England guys, or it's going to be probably perfect weather this time of year, isn't it?
Yeah. It's not going to be early September humidity, so it's probably going to be something they can handle.
It says, possible rain showers, but 83.
Yeah, typical Miami weather, huh?
So the home team here and the New York game?
Yeah, if I were both teams, I'd both take the visitor locker room the way they're playing and treat it as a road game. But yeah, it's an interesting battle. I like the way the New York Jets are coming together as a team. I was a little bit surprised the last time they played that they put up such a defensive effort against Philly without Sauce Gardner in the lineup. They were actually missing two cornerbacks in that game. I give the Jets and the way they play defense a lot of credit for how things are going.
We were mentioning earlier in the season how mediocre they've become because they were always a top 10 defense. 1, 2, 3, 4. And they've
where
back
are they
into
now?
the top 10 on my list on defense. How about you?
Defensively, I would say they're not in the top 10 of mine. No.
Okay.
Definitely not. But they're going to be one of the teams, I think, when you look back, let's say you're week 10 and you look back at your last 5 weeks, they're going to be one of the teams that you probably say, oh, look, the Jets are much better now than they were the first 5 weeks of the year.
There's another tough pill like Houston and Jacksonville to swallow with laying 3.
Yeah.
It just seems wrong.
You mean in the Jet game?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not right on my number.
But it just seems wrong, doesn't it? I mean, it isn't wrong. It just seems wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a stay away game. The numbers greatly favor the Jets. If you look at my matchup analysis, I should say, greatly favors the Jets. So in the 3 ways of handicapping, the power ratings are flat, nothing. The matchups clearly favor the Jets, and the situational slightly favors the New York Giants.
They should get as Scott's inferring, the Jets should get a few sacks.
Yeah. Although Tyrod's a better, I think Tyrod understands how to weave the pocket faster than Daniel Jones. He has a little bit more. I know Daniel Jones can run, but Tyrod Taylor has more instinctiveness or something about him that way. They both can take sacks, make no mistake about that. But I trust Tyrod to get out of a sticky situation more than Daniel Jones.
What do you make, and how much did it affect you to see what the Browns left on the field last week?
The Browns are a weird team. I thought the greatest move they made is when Watson was going to go back into the game, they probably looked at the stat sheet and said, wow, Watson's 1 for 5 and he's a liability. I think PJ Walker gives us the best chance to win in that game. And I think they're now comfortable saying that, Watson, you stay on the sidelines. Cleveland's defense overperformed early, and I think they're a really good team, but they're not the number 1 defense.
Well, they are no longer.
Yeah. So what was your thought?
It's just scary how bad that defense was. Come on. I mean, that was pretty, I don't know. They showed up and it was bad. It was kind of different than the Lions, where they didn't show up and they were bad. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. Well, Cleveland has stolen 2 games this year. 2 games that they should, they're, what are they, 4-3 or 4-2 actually, and they could very easily be 2-4. Indy won that game. We know that. It just didn't show on the scoreboard. And Myles Garrett, to his credit, made 2 game-changing plays. The referees would not even have to be involved if Myles Garrett didn't do Myles Garrett type things in terms of saving at least 10 points on the scoreboard. So give Cleveland credit for having one of the best players in the game.
So, but how do you view the Browns differently, or you thought that they were capable of that?
Yeah. I'll tell you what I think about the Browns, and it's being extremely honest in the situation. If I feel like I have a handle, and I feel like I have a great handle on probably 28 of the teams in the NFL right now, I feel really good as opposed to 4 weeks ago. The Browns are one of the 4 teams I still don't feel like I have a good handle on. And I just want to leave it at that. I don't think I'm the expert on what the Browns are capable of right now.
Who would you rather, if you were betting the Browns, who would you rather see behind center at this point?
Situationally, most likely PJ Walker against a team that understands how to how to bait quarterbacks. PJ Walker can be baited in interceptions. I think Seattle is a dangerous opponent for PJ Walker because of the way they teach defense. I think PJ Walker throws an interception in this game against other teams that do not have that kind of coachability that Seattle does. I think PJ Walker, I would much rather have him than Deshaun Watson, but it's team specific for me.
Well, I think a banged up Watson and whatever's going on in his head is can't be much better. So it just strange situation.
How would you like to be writing the check that you have to send to Watson every month?
That and Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
Before this weekend, I had these 2 teams pretty equal, and made a big move on my chart. So kind of glad I don't have to play Cleveland.
Yeah, I would. I can't play the game at the current odds.
So Kansas City, more injuries, more police arrests.
Yeah. Yeah. Nick Bolton's a big deal, by the way. I mean, this guy is one of the leading tacklers in the NFL, and he has uncanny linebacker speed. Well, Kansas City and Miami are built for speed. That's what Nick Bolton is all about. He gets there before the receiver knows what route he's going to do and where he's finishing. Nick Bolton's already there, and now he's not because he won't be on the field for 2 months.
Well, this is a repeat of what 2 weeks ago, where it was the we can't move the ball bowl, and it's just a boring game. Denver just couldn't score, and they scored once and got that 2-point conversion and gave hope to people, and then they gave up the field goal for the non-cover. But I haven't looked. Does Denver just have their number? Do they always play these games like this?
No, Kansas City's now 16-0, last 16 against Denver. So the big issue with Denver is, don't you feel that no matter how well Denver might play in this game, that they'll find a way to lose?
Yeah, pretty much. But with what we've seen every week, it seems actually it's Kansas City's turn to have a misstep and lose inexplicably. They're 5-1. They're due a loss.
Who's their next opponent? They go to Germany next.
Right.
I don't know if you look ahead to a Germany trip. You just say, "Oh, I have to go to Germany. Let's just win this game," or whatever. But yeah, I agree with you there. I wouldn't jump to the window to play either team, and this could be a slight letdown spot for Kansas City, even though they haven't been involved in these nail biters lately.
Well, those Charger Bronco games take a lot out of you, and then it's I don't know. It's just
a lot
Kansas
of
City had
rest. Kansas City had 10 days off, I think, before the game, and we talked about that. That's the reason I couldn't bet the Chargers, is because mentally and physically they weren't ready after 6 days. The only thing in their favor is they know Kansas City so well that you still expected it could be a close game, but it just was 10 days versus 6 days was too much to go against the weapons at Pat Mahomes' disposal. And Mahomes himself, he had open receivers. You know how wide open those receivers were against the Chargers. So that's probably what's going to happen against Denver's. Denver's pass defense, as I showed, is 75%. 3 out of every 4 passes are being complete against Denver. And now you got Mahomes in the building. Boy, I'm talking myself out of every play on the board the more we talk.
Cincinnati and the 49ers. That's what expectations do you have for this game?
This is the game I wrote about at Wager Talk, and I picked this because it almost mirrors Minnesota and San Francisco. Minnesota caught San Francisco at less than full strength, to put it mildly. No team had more serious injuries in 1 week than San Francisco the week before. Get well chance for Minnesota. If they win, they go 3-4, and they say, "Hey, please do not count us out of the playoff picture. We've just turned the ball over so many times." Now you got Cincinnati in the same situation. Joe Mixon, 2 weeks rest. Joe Burrow, 2 weeks rest. The young defense, 2 weeks rest. It's almost a situation where if Cincinnati wins this game, they're back to saying we are very much a team in the playoff picture. I think there's a situational scheduling and roster injury and recovery edge for Cincinnati.
I'm very curious to see. The problem though is what are we going to really learn for sure about the Bengals based on the way San Francisco's played the last 2 games? Is Purdy falling apart? A couple of those throws were really bad.
Minnesota doesn't have that good a defense to be creating that. Purdy was off, but then again, he didn't have Deebo Samuel, who takes up a lot of space. He didn't have Trent Williams, who protects the blind side, and he had to get it off a second. So in Purdy's defense, and I don't think Purdy was the superstar people made him out to be, but in Purdy's defense, he was missing 2 very important components.
Well, Samuel's not going to be back this week, so they're still going to be, having problems. They're trying to sputter their way into the bye here.
This question you have up is a complex question because it involves a lot of different things. in terms of the timing of the game, and the 6 days versus 10 days, the new coach bye weeks. We're talking about what else are we talking about? If there's film on certain quarterbacks, if there's tendencies that one team is heavily balanced to the run versus the pass, because what works one week may not work the next week. I like to play off one game versus another. And if you're playing one team with one style and you're playing another team with another style the next week, things may not work the same. I hope that makes some sense. I don't know how would you answer that question?
Well, yeah, that was a lot of, that was good stuff. The other thing that I like to wonder sometimes, what will bother me is if the games become too popular. When your sides are too popular, I don't know. It's an automatic red flag for me. Reading the market.
I can understand that. I was reading some of these tweets, and I don't know how much weight to put in them, but they were talking about all these sides that were the quote unquote public sides at BetMGM, for example. 80% on this team, 70% on this team. They listed 8 games, of which 6 of which I had the other side. It almost makes me feel better to say, hey, okay, you guys like that side. I already like the other side. It's not going to make me change my mind, but it kind of reinforces things.
Well, that's what sort of bothered me that I didn't mention before is I didn't have a lot. I mean, I wasn't against a lot of those public sides, and that's very unusual. So just made my ears perk up a little bit.
Yeah.
Because when that happens, I'm supposed to have a really great week, and the fact that I didn't is just,
yeah. It reinforces underdogs for me more than anything.
So Baltimore looked pretty darn good.
Yeah, this is one of the takeaways from last week. We both thought, rightfully so, that based on power numbers, Detroit had to be the better power rated team than Baltimore. And based on my numbers, I thought that Miami was rightfully better power rated than Philadelphia. But unlike Washington and the New York Giants, and unlike a Tampa, Atlanta, when good teams like Detroit go against other good teams like Baltimore, it's possible that if Baltimore plays their best game, Baltimore is the better team. And that's what happened. We knew that could happen. We knew Philly is a good enough team, obviously, to do what they did against Miami. So what I learned is that power ratings tell me a good picture of the story, but I'd much rather have that power rating value against bad teams than against good teams, because good teams, their ceiling just is that much higher. That's what I learned about Baltimore last week.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about, it didn't shock me to see Baltimore, do very well against the Lions. We talked about pre-game value in the line from what we have seen to that point. But I certainly didn't think Detroit was, any lock to win that game. I felt it could go either way. And it's just, I have Baltimore to win the division. I've got Baltimore futures, so I'm happy to see them kick some ass, and hopefully they can keep the momentum and stay healthy, because their offense, both their offense and their defense are, really darn good right now.
Yeah, so back to Baltimore. Now, obviously, they're over a touchdown favorite against Arizona. And it's the same old story for Arizona. They try really, really hard every game, but by the end of the game, you realize they just don't have the roster.
Let's see. Somebody was asking if the Ravens or the Chargers can lose. I think
anything's possible.
You would think Arizona could sneak it in, but if I had to pick one of the two to lose, I'd say the Chargers.
Yeah, the reason why the right choice would be the Chargers is because you look for teams that are, we talked about this with Buffalo. The Chargers do not have a good defense. At least they're not coached to have a good defense. Guys are getting wide open. I look at their numbers. Their sacks are up this year. That's good. Actually, they're showing some metrics, but why are these guys open all over the field all the time? You know, what's happening with the Chargers secondary in crunch time? You know, I don't know if it's field position. I don't know what's going on with the Chargers, but I'm always scared that they give up more points than their personnel should really. It's kind of like the Pittsburgh team in college. They sack people 50 times. They allow 3.5 yards per carry. It's hard to complete more than 55% of the passes. And at the end of the day, because of the way Pittsburgh Panthers in college play defense, they're still allowing 25 to 30 points per game because they play this all or nothing kind of defense. It almost seems like the Chargers give up more points than they should.
Yeah, I mean, hold on. That's the problem. Is I think anybody can score on them. So I took the over in that Chargers game early, and that's been going up. I don't know how either team's going to stop either team
In that Charger game against Chicago.
Right.
Yeah. I haven't handicapped the over-under in that game at all. In fact, I haven't really looked at Chicago that much. I want to take a look more about their new quarterback and how he translates. I believe he's announced as already being the starter for this Sunday night game.
I think so.
Yeah. I watched him work at the combine because he did some extra throwing at the combine. And I watch all the quarterbacks at the combine because it's my job to watch all the quarterbacks at the combine. And I saw some decent things out of him. I think eventually the NFL is going to catch up to him because there's a lot of limitations to his game. And you just don't go from his division right to the NFL and succeed. But regardless, he's getting a chance to play. And if he stays mistake prone, anything is possible.
Well, surprisingly enough, the Chicago Bears have gained the most value over the last 5 weeks.
Yeah. I don't have a number that I could intelligently weigh as far as what his quarterback rating should be. So I didn't try to set a power rating on this game. I just have a sample size of one game. I don't know the difference between him and Fields, other than the fact that Fields would run much better than this guy will run. So I would be taking a shot in the dark to assign a power rating, so I just didn't.
Well, good Monday night game, at least. I don't think there's any issue if the Lions are going to win that game. Campbell's all about, basically said, I guarantee you we're going to be showing up next week.
And what better opponent to show up against, huh? So, yeah, I would expect a supreme performance from Detroit. I'm thinking of this just right now, so bear with me on this particular point. But thinking out loud, how many points do you think Vegas should be expected to score in this game versus a very mad Detroit team?
20.
Okay, according to what's the line? Roughly 9:45. So they're expected to score about 18 based on simple math. And you say 20. So that disappoints me because I kind of have the feeling that, and I got lucky. So I'm 1-0. We talked about this on the Friday show that because I didn't know what Charger team would show up, that I wanted Pat Mahomes and the Chargers over that 26.5, 27.5 number on Friday. And that worked. My initial thought is that 18 or less, I would take Vegas under.
Yeah, I see it's 17.5. I mean, I was kind of waffling between 17 and 20, and I just gave him an extra field goal because I thought night game national TV.
If you think Detroit won't turn the ball over much, and I think with Goff, that's a reasonable assumption that he won't turn the ball over much in this particular matchup, then Vegas has to earn all their points, correct? So you either get a Jimmy G off 2 weeks concussion rest, or you get Brian Hoyer, who doesn't exactly, instill confidence, or you get Neil O'Donnell, who's going to be check down Neil in the NFL.
Well,
I'm starting to like my thought process, but I'm just saying it out loud to hear what I'm saying, to say, Ron, do you make sense or do you not make sense? That's what this brainstorming is all about, right?
Yeah, and Montgomery will not be back, and they didn't run the ball well last week, so that's a potential issue with less dependable people taking the handoffs. So there are your potential turnovers.
Okay, who scares you on Vegas's offense besides Adams?
Nobody.
Yeah, I mean Jacobs is fine, but he's not going to run on the Lions. It's hard to run on the Lions.
No. It did seem
Monday night team total under is very unusual, but the Monday night games are going under this year.
They are, and so are the games in general. It's just strange happenings. And then somebody mentioned to me that the first halves are going over and the full games are going under in NCAA. So a lot of goofy things.
Yeah, everybody's still dealing with the clock rules and stuff in college. It really depends on what scheme you run. If you run a scheme, I'll take the team I know well, Oregon State, for example. They score a lot of points, but they don't do it with hurry-up offenses. They run an offense that generally snaps the ball with about 5, 6, 7 seconds left. So if Oregon State has a rushing advantage in a particular game, they're going to milk the clock because they're not a hurry-up offense, and they don't pretend to be a hurry-up offense. And there's a few teams like that. We know service academies are like that. But besides that, there are a few teams that do not go with these hurry-up things. There's a few Big Ten teams that are like that. I don't know what Michigan's style is in terms of hurry up or not hurry up, whether they've changed that, because I haven't watched a Michigan game this year. But
they scored with 8 seconds to go needlessly. They went over the total by themselves. They pitch a shutout. Very frustrating for underbettors.
Yeah, that was another weird one, huh?
Side topic, I've been spending more time on college than I normally do. What about you? Where's your time being divided?
Well, I don't have any pure wood here, but I've really enjoyed a nice 2-year run in college, and I'm just doing it bit by bit. Some weeks I start the NFL before college. Some weeks I do college before NFL. Some weeks when I'm writing down, when I'm multitasking, watching the games on Sunday, and I'm writing down the stats and looking at the box scores, because box score management is so important in college. Get those sacks out of the way, get those fake punts out of the way, the kneel downs. You have to have accurate data in college. When I'm doing that and a red flag comes in, then I'm saying, okay, circle this game. I want to know what the openers are and so on. But I have not, for example, this week, I won't hone in on most of the college until tomorrow morning. I take my time.
Did you take anything tonight?
I don't even remember who's playing tonight.
New Mexico State, Louisiana Tech, Liberty, Western Kentucky.
No, I have a note to myself. I still have some time because the numbers I show on the Liberty game are skewed. I need to know if there are injuries for Western Kentucky. There's a lot of quarterbacks in the MAC that went down this past week and in the Sun Belt. And it annoys me because I have to do extra research because I don't have team sheets for those conferences. Team sheets are like this. There's a wealth of information on my team sheets, but I have no team sheets for Liberty or Western Kentucky. So I have to do research. Do you know of any Western Kentucky injuries?
I do not.
Yeah, because if there are no injuries, Western Kentucky shows value for me. I don't know about for you.
No, I don't really have anything. That's why I was hoping to see if you had anything, but I think I'm sitting the night out.
I'm going to look real quick. Western Kentucky. Nothing that means something. A long snapper may miss the game. You don't see those every day.
No. The Liberty side seems. I didn't handicap this game just because it doesn't meet a filter regarding yardage. But everybody that I heard loved Liberty, and now it's bouncing back down.
Yeah, well, the number doesn't. One thing I'll say about Liberty is they're going to cost me money in the season win total. So, I always hate that if I'm wrong about the team in the overall scheme of things, but I think there's value playing the other team. I'm looking
Anything
at Western
else?
Kentucky's quarterback.
Anything else on your mind? You said something about.
So how many sides do you think at this point? I know it's conjecture. How many sides do you think at this point you might have for this week for the NFL?
Too many.
Because I think this is, like I said, I think it's going to be, and I'm okay with it if it plays out this way. I think this is going to be a small week for me in the NFL.
It's going to be an active week as usual, but I'm just questioning how I want to approach it.
Yeah.
It's a very, very tricky week to bet as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. It's funny how each week gets its own merits because you want to say, hey, I just had a spectacular week in the NFL. I want to keep it going. And then I see this card and I say, well, I guess I'm not going to keep it going. What about Seattle?
Seattle's got hope now.
Personally, not on my radar.
Yeah, I mean, Seattle's got a lot of hope now.
Somebody, I don't know who, so I don't want to take away credit, but somebody queried about Tennessee a week or two ago and said Tennessee under 7.5 looks good. And I said, yeah, sounds good. I'll look up the schedule. And it was too good to be true, actually, that Tennessee 7.5. So I rolled with that. Seattle, I wouldn't roll with divisional because San Francisco, once they get healthy, is just they're 6 points better than Seattle.
Well, that's true, but they're never going to be healthy.
Yeah, well, survival of the fittest. When we get to week 18, how many teams are going to be healthy? 3? It's going to be terrible.
That's about all I got.
That's good enough for this week. I do not know what games we're covering with Sports USA. But I think one of them is Cincy San Francisco. If it is, that'll be fun. There'll be more to say about that.
Sounds good. Nice chat. Appreciate anybody joining us.
Talk to you later.
Talk to you later.